A Texas couple used social media to promise custom new homes and renovations, but they were actually frauds, stealing millions of dollars from their unsuspecting clients, at least until the federal government caught up to them and tried and convicted them on conspiracy charges. We're digging into the unbelievable details of their behavior, laid out in black and white in a federal indictment. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, real quick before we get into this case, I want to talk about our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest personal injury law firm. They're a firm with more than 1,000 attorneys who have recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when insurance offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That's 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan makes it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/OTC. You can click the link below or scan the QR code on your screen. The two people we're talking about in this case are Christopher and Raquel Judge. They're spending their new year getting ready for prison. Both of them entered guilty pleas to wire fraud conspiracy charges in North Texas federal court. And their story is frankly like an episode of Fixer Upper with Chip and Joanna Gaines, but this time it goes horribly wrong. Now, the couple admitted to stealing nearly $5 million from customers for unfinished custom home building and remodeling projects. And the details of the scheme, they're pretty shocking, so let's get into it. The judges, who were managing members of Judge DFW LLC in the Fort Worth area, use social media apps like TikTok and Instagram to sell the vision of their business. High-end, custom dream homes done exactly to their clients' specifications. But the actual results were just that, dreams, not reality. And those dreams quickly turned into nightmares. Now, one of the victims was a woman named Kristen Newman, and she spoke with Texas media outlet WFAA, and they said that everything was fine in the beginning when she hired the judges, with Christopher presenting himself as an architect and a builder, but then things went south as construction just dragged on. She told WFAA, quote, "We started questioning some things. Hey, why isn't this done?" Then it got to, "Hey, I think you're overcharging for this." At one point, I overpaid for something. I said, "Hey, can I have that money back because you haven't done it and that's part of this other draw?" And he said, "I don't have it anymore." Now, another victim named Lane Simmons told the outlet, quote, "They came to our house and really pitched themselves as like this Chip and Joanna Gaines type of vibe. My house, everything they did is wrong. Within weeks, my tile was cracking, my floors are cracking, my kitchen floor is sinking in. The exterior trim looks like a child did it. All the framing we had to re-tear out and rebuild. My staircase had to be re-torn out and rebuilt. It was only held up by one piece of board on the inside. Just code violation after code violation. We had a family friend that's also a contractor come over and look over everything, and he's like, man, there's a lot of this is unsafe. This is like the worst job I've probably ever seen." Now, Christopher and Raquel Judge were each indicted on 7 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 1 count for 7 sets of victims, each defrauded out of thousands of dollars. One couple, according to court paperwork, made 12 total payments to the judges, losing more than $350,000. Civil lawsuits were filed, and one of the victims hired an inspector who discovered that Christopher wasn't actually a credentialed architect. Victims told WFAA that it was difficult to find a law enforcement agency willing to take up the complicated white-collar case, but the Euless, Texas Police Department did take on the task with the help of the FBI and U.S. Secret Service. Now, let's take a look at the criminal complaint and indictment that was filed against the judges in the Northern District of Texas. The indictment reads, quote, "It was part of the conspiracy and scheme to artifice to defraud for defendants Christopher Judge and Raquel Judge to advertise their business. Judge DFW using Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok posts and messages. The relevant posts and messages represented that they owned a custom home building and remodeling business. The defendants purported to offer architecture, construction, and interior design decor services and falsely represented that Christopher Judge was an architect. Once a potential customer contacted Judge DFW and expressed interest in building a home or remodeling, Christopher Judge would submit a below-market bid for the project, promising completion within 4 to 6 months. Now, once the customer agreed to hire the defendants, the customer would sign a contract and pay the defendants in multiple installments via wire transfer or check, thus causing interstate wire transmissions. Many victims were instructed to wire installment payment money to the defendant's Chase business account. Any checks were made payable to the business and deposited into the business account. Once the victim's money was deposited, however, the defendants often transferred the money into other jointly held Chase bank accounts and used the money to perpetuate the scheme and for personal living expenses, including luxury items. According to an FBI special agent with the White Collar Crime Division, the judges would get the project started, but then things would stall out. And when the judges did hire subcontractors, they hired substandard, cheap workers who did a lousy job per the complaint. Now, when the victims would reach out to the judges about what was going on, Christopher was reportedly evasive, always having an excuse and insisting that the work would continue if the victims kept sending in payments. And the size of the scheme was massive. The indictment states, quote, from at least in or about August 2020, so we are going back to the pandemic, and continuing until about January 2023, the defendants defrauded over 40 victims who resided in 6 counties within the Northern District of Texas, related to at least 24 construction projects, and caused a total loss of over approximately $4.8 million. And the pair had gotten in trouble before with the state of Texas for hundreds of code violations and for continuing to claim that Christopher was an architect. Quote, the defendants expressly told relevant victims, often in emails or text messages, that they were a one-stop shop for custom home building, purporting to offer architecture, construction, and interior design decor services. Defendants each falsely represented that Christopher Judge was an architect. As a result, in May 2022, the Texas Board of Architecture issued a formal warning to Christopher Judge and Judge DFW, informing them both that they violated the Texas Administrative Code by referring to Christopher Judge as an architect and describing the business as Judge DFW Architecture, and representations to the public because neither the individual nor the entity were properly registered as an architect or an architect business in Texas. Now, a chart provided in court paperwork shows just a portion of the fraud that the judges committed, with the amount paid to the defendants ranging from around $52,000 all the way up to $364,000. Now, the chart also shows how long the cons went on for, most for several months, even a year, all over the Fort Worth area. Now, while prosecutors say that Christopher was the one purporting to be an architect and rebuilder, Raquel was also intimately involved in this scheme. The indictment says that she was the one who set up in-person or remote meetings with potential victims, explained the construction and design contract, and said a $10,000 deposit was required. She then emailed the signed contracts to the victims. Now, she was also posting about their work all over Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, posting in local Facebook groups like Alliance Working Moms and Moms of Southlake. Screenshots of her posts were included in court filings. Investigators discovered that the couple was intermingling funds from different projects, using payments from one party to pay for renovations on another, but they were also spending a significant portion of the money on themselves. The complaint put together by the FBI reads, quote, from October 2020 to January 2023, as part of the scheme, the defendants spent over approximately $865,000 of Judge DFW installment payments on their own personal living expenses, including payments of the approximate amounts listed below. $285,000 on payroll payments to defendants, $133,000 on cash withdrawals, $82,000 on purchases through Amazon.com, $70,000 on civil legal fees and other lawsuit costs, $27,000 on personal mortgage payments, $10,000 on plastic surgery, and $10,000 at Walmart. Now, both Christopher and Raquel agreed to plea deals, entering guilty pleas to 1 count each of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Raquel's sentencing is set for April 14th, and she is facing up to 5 years in federal prison. The penalty for Christopher, when he is sentenced in May, is more significant, up to 20 years in prison. The couple has also been ordered to pay back the millions of dollars that they stole from their victims. Joining us now to talk more about this case is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Randy Zellin, who has a lot of experience when it comes to working cases of complex fraud like we have here out of Fort Worth, Texas. Thanks for being with us here on Law and Crime. Before we talk about the sentences that are expected for Randy, or Raquel and Christopher.
Right. I'm not in trouble yet. Maybe one day, but not today.
You don't want to be them in these cases. But what stands out to you about how they appear to have gone about this fraud scheme that went on for years?
There's nothing, and obviously I say this against the backdrop of having been doing this on the defense side for 35 years, 38 years in total. So there's really not a lot I haven't seen. So yes, masquerading around as architects, as builders, as contractors. Yes, it's insanely important for the victims. It is insanely important to the community. But from a defense attorney standpoint, who swims in the pool of complex criminal and civil frauds, this is, if I spoke French, I guess I would say de rigueur. It's nothing that's so shocking to me. It's another way to take money from people who otherwise would not have parted with their money if they knew the truth of you.
Well, and they were facing federal charges. And I know that might have something to do with just the way the money was distributed through like wire fraud. Why was this a federal case?
Well, when you're talking about the use of interstate wires, and here, as you aptly note, you've got money passing through banks, between banks by wires. You have emails. You may even have faxes if in fact there were any faxes that were sent. So it is the use of the wires in interstate commerce that gives the federal government, as opposed to the state of Texas, the authority to jump in and say, hey, we got this.
When it comes to this couple, because I think we've all seen the stories of like a contractor who swindles somebody and walks off a job. You know, this couple, though, they were very public with just their personalities. And they're on social media and TikTok. When you, and I know like from the work you've done, you know, on the defense side even, like when you look at fraudsters, like what is it about their personality that sticks out to you?
Well, you tell a lie, and then you have to tell another lie, and then you have to tell another lie to keep the 2 or 3 preceding lies going. I don't want to paint too broad of a brush stroke, because I've represented many people accused of fraud who were very quiet about the way they did it, very select in the way that they did it. And then, of course, you have the flip side, as we have here with the judges, who were very loud, outlandish, outgoing. That's how they attracted their clientele. You've got, for example, the Bernie Madoffs of the world, who were super quiet. In fact, part of his hook was to say, I don't want your business, which made me want to do business with you even more. So you've got that type of fraudster, very quiet, very discreet, very low key. And then you've got the fraudsters who are just screaming for the attention because they want to bring in the business, and the money and the lifestyle just further emboldens them to be even more brazen, even more outgoing. That's the best psychology 101 analysis that I can give you. I've represented all kinds of people engaged in fraud. I've represented people who you could vacation with, have dinner with, who maybe even were very well-meaning in terms of the business venture that they got involved in. But then something went wrong. And when they should have made a left and shut it down and say, I'm sorry, it didn't work out, so be mad at me, sue me civilly. No, they lied to keep it going, hoping it would come back and everything would be okay. And that snowball just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you have to tell more lie and more lie and more lies to keep it going. I've represented doctors, super terrific people, well-meaning, who got caught up in a scheme, and instead of walking away from it, couldn't walk away for whatever the reason, whether it's greed, embarrassment, humiliation, thinking it would actually come back. And then, yes, I've represented those people who, if you opened their ribcage up, I mean, it's just frauds. They can't help themselves. It's almost like the old story of the scorpion and the frog. Scorpion is what the scorpion is. It's still going to sting the frog, even if it means they both drown.
And I think too, and I'm happy you brought up Bernie Madoff, because in the scheme that he ran, in a lot of ways, it was, okay, here's this person, and I'm giving you these incredible returns that no one else is doing right now. But in reality, it was taking money from one account and then passing it over, and then it ends up being this Ponzi scheme that is the house of cards that comes down. In this case, they have one house project, and we're going to pay for the work being done, not good work, but we're going to pay for the renovation being done with the money that somebody else gave us for another project. I guess, what do you make of that? Where it's like, yeah, very different types of crimes from like Bernie Madoff on a smaller scale, though we're talking about millions, but it seems like there is that comparison of just trying, hey, if we get that new renovation, we can take the money to do the last one, the last one, the last one, and then it snowballs.
The essence of a Ponzi scheme. And again, for a lot of people, there's not that much of a difference if you run a small business and it's perfectly legal and it's perfectly legitimate. You're running a small business, you are oftentimes using the money that just came in to pay your bills from a month or two ago. And as long as someone doesn't come to you with their money and say, this money is only supposed to be used for this, and as long as you're not lying to people about your state of affairs to get them to invest more, that's how small businesses operate. If you're lucky enough to have plenty of money in the bank and to have a cushion, God bless you. But for a lot of small business owners, it is a matter of, okay, money came in today, I can pay last month's bills. And that's just the cycle of business. But the essence of a Ponzi scheme is not simply taking your money for the new investment or taking your money to pay this other person their return. It's when you lie about it and you are not telling the person that just you took their money from, they gave you their money to invest. They didn't give you their money to go pay somebody else back. They paid you so you could make more money, which makes them more money. So it is the taking of the money and the lying, the false pretenses under which you're taking the money and what you're doing with the money. And the fact that you're constantly borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and you're not even borrowing because it's an investment. It's not a debt. It's not, and by the way, you can get jammed up with that too, but often these are investments. They're equity investments. So I lie to you to get you to invest with me because my neighbor next door has been banging on my door for 2 weeks. Hey, Randy, where's my investment back? I told you I needed that money back. I've got college tuition due. This was a short-term investment as you promised me. And I'm like, oh, no. We just closed on a deal. And we'll be fine. Meanwhile, I'm lying to both of you because your money's not being invested. Your money's going to pay him, and he's being lied to because he thinks I just closed on a business deal. I didn't. I convinced you to invest with me.
And in this case, so they were accused and they've pleaded guilty to stealing roughly $5 million, and it goes from 2020 to 2023. There were victims that I think wanted them prosecuted sooner, and we're looking for a police department to act on this, but a lot of these departments are not maybe built to do the white collar crime that like the FBI does. And I think there are a lot of stories that homeowners will have, not in this case, of just like a contractor who walks off the job and like there's really never like charges. Maybe it goes to like small claims court. In a case like this, I guess looking at a case like this, like how common is it that this actually gets prosecuted? I mean, this one seems like it was pretty large, but it feels like you could find this on a smaller scale and nothing ever happens.
Absolutely true. While every case stands on its own, there are certain things that prosecutors or law enforcement people look at a local level as opposed to a federal level. Certainly, if we prosecuted people every time there was a business dispute, we wouldn't be able to build jails quickly enough. And there's a big difference between breaching a contract and committing fraud. They may be the exact same thing, but it's a matter of timing. So, for example, if I'm trying to convince you to invest in my yellow sticky pad note business, if at the time that I ask you for an investment, let's say I'm trying to convince you to give me $10,000, and at the time I ask you for that money, I am negotiating with a company who will get me the paper and get me the glue backing and the glue, this new technology where it stays on forever and you don't get dog ears. And I'm really negotiating with them. And let's say it falls through. Well, I haven't defrauded you. I may not be able to pay you your money back because I used your money, but I didn't defraud you. Conversely, if at the time that I tell you I have this deal, I got this new company, I'm negotiating with them, they just need to see that I've got some working capital. There's no such company. No such company exists. I could never even do this business because Post-it has a patent on the technology. That's fraud. And the difference is what I say and when I say it and what I believe to be true.
Because on that note, like how much does this case, because apparently they were not very good at home renovation. You know, just the tile was coming apart. It just was not as good as probably the pictures they were showing people. How much of this case hinged on the fact that he said that he was an architect and that was what they were selling, as opposed to the work not being done and it just not being done well?
Well, certainly a lie that can be so easily proven to be objectively true or false does make it easier for a prosecutor to say this is a crime, this is not a civil dispute that belongs in civil court and will navigate its way through the justice system over the next 5 to 10 years. But no different than if I were to say to you, I'm a lawyer and I want you to retain me on your case and you pay me a $25,000 retainer, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a law license. I've never had a law license. That's a very different case than me saying to you, I'm a lawyer, pay me $25,000, and you pay me and I do a lousy job. That is probably more civil in nature than me not being a lawyer at all. That's pretty easy in terms of having committed a criminal fraud, where you make a material misrepresentation, you rely on it, and my God, I mean, yeah. And from a matter of public policy, we don't want people running around pretending to be lawyers when they're not. And think about what damage a fake architect could do. Imagine putting up a building and the building collapses and kills the people inside. That's why we require architects to be licensed.
In as far as what happens now, so they stole roughly $4.8 million. Don't know if those people will ever, how much they'll ever see back of that money. But they are facing Raquel up to 5 years in prison and then Christopher up to 20 years in prison. This was part of a plea deal. As a defense attorney, I mean, based on what they were accused of doing, what they've admitted to doing, like, is this a good deal for them compared to what it could have been?
Well, I have the benefit of doing this for a living. Therefore, I can go into the court computer and actually look at the physical agreements. So when we're talking about federal criminal justice and federal criminal crimes, everything in the federal criminal justice system is reduced to points. Think of it like Scrabble. Every letter carries with it a certain number of points. In federal criminal law, every crime carries with it a certain number of points. Then there are things that you do as part of the crime which 99% of the time adds more points. So for example, wire fraud. The points assigned for wire fraud are 7 when you can get up to 20 years. Then the amount of money that you steal from people or the amount of money that you gain from your criminal fraud, that carries with it points. And then there are other things that carry on that you do in furtherance of the crime that carry points. You add up all the points. If you plead guilty, you subtract some points. Then you go to a chart called the sentencing chart. And the sentencing chart has a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. The vertical axis are the points, all the way to 43. The horizontal axis is your criminal history. And you go on the chart and you see where they intersect. So in this particular instance, for example, for the husband, I've reviewed the plea agreement. And with the plea agreement, while the plea agreement doesn't actually give us the points calculations, there is an agreement where the government and the defense have stipulated that Chris's sentence will not be more than 78 months. And the judge actually has to bless that. It's not a common thing that happens in federal criminal practice. Most of the time, you have no idea what your sentence is going to be. And the judge is not bound by your agreement. In this particular instance, it's called the C plea. Here, the government and the defense have both agreed that the judge has to bless it for this to happen. So Chris is not getting more than 78 months if this is going through, which means his guideline range, that chart, is probably 63 months on the low end to 78 months on the high end. So if you did some quick back of the envelope calculations, his base offense level is 7. $5 million is another 18 points, so now he's at 25 points. Then they probably hit him for some other enhancements. He gets 3 points knocked off for accepting responsibility for pleading guilty, and that's how he probably ends up at this 63 to 78 month range, where the government and the defense have agreed that the judge will not give him more than 78. Could give him less, but won't give him more.
Interesting. Yeah, so we'll see how it plays out. As far as the people who were victims, I mean, there was one person who lost more than $360,000. I mean, what's the likelihood they see that money come back to them?
Well, if I recall correctly, Chris is being represented by a government-appointed lawyer. So I would say slim and none, and Slim's out of town. There'll be an order of restitution, and that will be a judgment like any other judgment. And if they get jail time, if he gets jail time, then $25 a month will be deducted from whatever money he has coming to him from working in the jail or whatever he does in the jail. And then there'll be a portion of whatever income he has going forward that gets taken out. If he wins the lottery, then these people will get paid. If he can get a hold of some money, it's always a good idea before sentencing to show a judge you've made some effort. I've had judges look at me, Randy, your client came in, did not give you $1 to put into escrow. Well, Your Honor, he really doesn't have any money. Randy, he's got a cell phone, he paid a cell phone bill. Has a car, made a car payment. Put food on the table, paid his rent. I see he's walking in with clothes on his back. Don't tell me he could have not saved up. I don't care if it was $500 or $1,000 or $1,500. It wasn't even necessarily the money. It was the principle that you thought it was important enough to try. I once had a judge get so angry at me for that the judge actually left the bench for 15 minutes to compose himself. That was a lesson learned. Always have a client give you $500. Judge, he tried. She tried. And that will mean something. Now, if your client's a millionaire, that's probably a pretty stupid thing to do. But assuming, since your client has to fill out financial disclosure for the probation department, your client truly is broke, coming in with something means something to a judge.
No, that's a good point there. We'll see how things play out on the sentencing for this couple. I mean, obviously people left with quite a mess with their homes. Randy Zellin, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. Fascinating discussion. Thanks for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. We appreciate it.
Appreciate to be with you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.